Brothers, sisters, comrades and friends, welcome to Bat Country. A lot has happened since we last talked. The truth is, I haven't posted for a couple of weeks because I've become bogged down creating this kind of documentary style episode which is coming soon. But it's already taken me like 50 hours of editing, which means I haven't been able to do any of my regular content. And two other things have happened. One is I finally got my professional mic and audio setup back from being stuck in Berlin. And two, I passed 5,000 subscribers on my little YouTube channel. And that's quite big for me. To celebrate, I didn't really have any massive original ideas, so I figured we would just do a Q&A, because I know that the people who are not familiar with my channel don't care about that stuff, and people who are really super invested will watch it. So it's just for you, for people who watch regularly. Am I set up okay? So, I have a lot to thank you for. I think it would be trite to reiterate just how important this channel has become to me. And since we're going off script and being a little more intimate, a little bit more personal, the YouTube channel has been overwhelming. It's a big surprise to me. I have a very busy life in general. My work is kind of international, and marketing it moves fast and it consumes a lot of your processing power. And I've allowed the YouTube channel, I've allowed Bat Country to become a very big part of my life, even though it doesn't pay for itself or anything in the same way. What I mean by that is I don't look to it for financial reward in the same way that I look to other side projects for financial reward. I can pay my rent in other ways. This is important for keeping me sober. It's part of my process. And now 5,171 of you are in the process too. And that's weird. That's like a Sunday league football stadium full of people listening to me talk about not drinking. So look, this is a Q&A, let's not fuck around, let's just get straight into it. I haven't reviewed these up front. I'm just going to go through them and provide some thoughts as we go in a kind of relaxed and informal, get to know you kind of way. First up is my old friend Slayer Sober. Good to hear from you, mate, and I'm happy to see you doing well at the moment. Slayer says, "Congratulations on the 5,000 subscribers, brother. Very well earned. I knew you would blow up." I guess my question would be, what have you learned about yourself through doing YouTube? Okay, so one is that I can always find time, no matter how busy I am, to do something for the benefit of my sobriety. YouTube has forced me to put what we're doing now, has forced me to put it front and center in my life, and to make time for it in a way that it's easy to say that you do without really doing it. It's shown me that I have the capacity to do 2 jobs, to run 2 businesses plus a side gig, when the side gig is genuinely important. I've come to terms with listening to my own voice. Everybody struggles with that, right? And when I was doing podcasts and stuff with other people in my other industry, I would often never listen to them. I was quite happy to record them and to talk, and then I would dismiss them off into the ether and never ever listen to them when they were sent to me. But sitting down and editing videos of your own face and your own voice hour after hour, it teaches you to get comfortable in your own company and with your own voice. So YouTube has taught me to like myself, to tolerate myself a little bit better. What else? YouTube has taught me that no matter how good your intentions, 1, you will always make mistakes and piss people off, and 2, people will always be mean for the sake of being mean. People leave mean comments for no reason. Like, I'm aware that I'm a strange-looking human. I don't I don't need internet strangers to point it out for me. People can be mean. Like, I will get 50 positive comments a day, but the one that says, "I don't like the way you say comrade" in the introductions, that's the one that sticks in my brain when I'm trying to go to sleep. So I hope that those are something to go on about this process of doing YouTube, which I never thought I would do. It is fun, and when it's good, it feels really good. Like, for example, I did a video about 5 weeks ago about what it's like to go through a binge, and it was extremely honest, one of the most honest ones I've done. And to see that blow up in the way that it has, it's past 40,000 views, I think, now, and is still getting people to subscribe to the channel and still leaving comments every day on that particular video. And they've all been positive there. And that's incredible. I think if anything, the process of doing YouTube has taught me that the stories that I have been in the past scared to tell people about have often been the ones that have been most helpful to others. That thing about how your lowest point might be somebody else's survival guide, I think is very true. And what that process has shown me is that my experience does have value for people. And I think that that's what I would like to pass on as well to people who are watching this and have a phone camera and access to YouTube. You should do this. It's incredibly helpful. If you can tolerate people just being mean for the sake of being mean, then this is a good thing to do. So thank you, Slayer, for our most recent question. I hope you're doing good, mate. We're all pulling for you. And we all love you. Okay, next. In a departure, Red-Pilled Simp asks, what is your opinion on the normalization of alcohol, especially in Western countries? I think alcohol is way too normal. Go visit someone and they'll ask you what you want to drink, a Coke or coffee or a beer. Look at any given restaurant or cafe, nearly 95% of people have some sort of alcoholic beverage in front of them. I'm not advocating for prohibition at all, only to give alcohol a more special meaning. So, what is my opinion on the normalization of alcohol? I wish alcohol had never been invented, but we're stuck with it. Here's my opinion. Alcohol really screwed me up early, really young. Like, before I should have had access to it, I was already indebted to it. And for that reason, I resent alcohol deeply. But it's not alcohol's fault. And it's not my fault. And it's easy to say it's society's fault. But what does that really mean? In a perfect world, we wouldn't have to worry about such things. In a perfect world, alcohol would have no effect on us, apart from for cleaning wounds and that kind of thing. But since we don't live in a perfect world, I would suggest that in a better world, if we were going to normalize alcohol, we should also normalize the discussion of its negative effects. So in every advert in which you see attractive 20-somethings drinking Bacardi on some beach at sunset, you should also have an advert showing a 50-year-old man with liver cirrhosis wishing that he'd quit earlier. Or for every advert that suggests cynically that alcohol makes you more sexually attractive and more likely to get laid, you should have a counter advert which demonstrates how embarrassing it is to not be able to get an erection when you're drunk. You know, that's balance. So the fact that alcohol has the power to do so much damage, and regularly does, and it costs all of our health system so much, and yet there is such poor education about what happens for the minority of us who will die for it. The normalization is toxic. I think it might be getting better. I have, in the course of my duties, the opportunity to speak to people younger than me. And a lot of them don't have the same relationship with alcohol that people of my generation did. It's incredibly available to them, but when I was growing up, it was worse. I remember it being worse. I remember things called Alco Pops, which were like colourful, very, very sugary drinks sold dead cheap in corner shops and stuff like that. The marketing for which was almost obviously aimed at very young people to get them hooked early in the way that cigarette marketing used to do. And I think that's gone away in the Western world. So there are improvements. We just need to keep moving in that direction. Ultimately, I think it would be of benefit to learn from the way that cigarettes have been kind of shunned out of regular circulation. It's unusual, at least in England, it's unusual to see people smoking publicly these days. And I think that alcohol could quite possibly be subject to that same kind of pariah status with enough regulation, with enough public momentum behind it. Make it expensive, make it difficult. Make it uncool. Thank you very much for the question, Red-Pilled Simp. It's very difficult to say that name with a straight face. Gorilla TV says, I'm getting that audiobook version as soon as I get my next Audible credit. Okay, so what, Gorilla, thank you very much for that, Gorilla. I take that as a massive compliment. Gorilla TV is talking about buying this. My little book about the journey that led me into alcoholism, which I'm repeatedly and increasingly told is quite good, and more people should read it, which I shamefully and shamelessly, ironically, publicised in a recent video and caused it to sell out in about 2 hours. That was a humbling moment, because that video that I talked about this book in and said that I had some available for sale, I recorded the video. It was about 40 minutes long or something, and then I published it, and then I went to bed and watched the video to review it because it was really late and I was really tired, so I didn't watch it before I published it. I just released it out into the world. And then by the time I'd finished reviewing the video, the live version on YouTube, like 4 people had already bought the book. And I was like, well, that's unexpected. And it was overwhelming. Made my mum cry. And I'm very proud of it. So, look, I hate doing this stuff. As I said at the start, this isn't supposed to be making money or anything. But I did get more in because a whole bunch of people also emailed me after they went out of stock. So they're in stock now. Go to batcountry.co, or the link is in the description if you want to read my account of how I kind of devolved into unbelievably stupid, desperate, suicidal alcoholism while I was cycling from Shanghai to London on my own. That's how this all started. That's where Bat Country comes from. So if you have been waiting for it, or if you are interested in the backstory that led to this, to where we are now, it's all in here. It's called Just Crazy Enough to Work: How to Fail on the Silk Road. Okay, and then we have, moving on, Jeff, who goes by Jeff6788. And Jeff asks, I asked before, sorry about that, if I didn't get to it last time, I'm sorry, I'll answer it now. Would you do a podcast or video with Liver Disease Channel or Sober James or Slayer Sober? And what's your opinion on the whole sober YouTube community? Thank you. Well, thank you, Jeff. Okay, let's spend some time talking about YouTube. And to answer the first part of your question, would I do a podcast with Liver Disease or Sober James or Slayer Sober? Some of us we all talk to each other to some degree. And some people more than others. I'm a little bit on the outside, being a Brit, I suppose. Yes, I would consider it. Liver disease, LD, as most of us know him, is a real inspiration for me, as well as everybody else. He's the person that I consider is doing this best. And by this, I mean talking about the consequences of alcoholism on YouTube. Sober James, I know a little less about. I've had no direct contact with James ever, I don't think. And but I'd happily talk to him. And of course Slayer, Slayer's been in this video twice now. Slayer, who I adore and worship, and is incredibly good at what he does as well. There is talk behind the scenes of all jumping on each other's channels and that kind of thing, and I'm happy to do it. I don't know what I would add to someone like LD's channel though. It would be no benefit for him to get me on, and you have to understand, especially LD who does this every day, it's a big commitment for him, and also for me who has a life away from the camera. The logistics of it are not quite as simple as it sounds. It's easy to say you should go on somebody's podcast, but they are logistically, they can be hard to handle, and I am quite, believe it or not, considering my recent videos where the audio quality has been very bad and I'm usually out of focus. I do take the quality, like the production quality, quite seriously, and I lose control over that when I hand off half of the video to a guest or something. Another factor is that we share so much of the same audience, like people who watch Slayer and watch LD also watch me, and vice versa, and others, and all the other kind of up and coming sober YouTubers. We all dip into the same pool of people, which means what if I say one thing here and then say it again on LD's channel? What difference? That message isn't going to a new audience. I'll tell you what I would be really interested in doing is talking about addiction and recovery on channels that are not at all related to addiction and recovery. I think that's the way to kind of stop preaching to the choir. And it has the benefit of, one, growing your own audience if you're good at it, and two, spreading a message of positivity about an alcohol-free lifestyle to people who might not be familiar with it. So yes, I would be happy to do everybody else's podcast, but if there is an opportunity to do podcasts that are in front of unusual audiences, then I would prioritize that, because I think that has more value in the world. The second part, what's your opinion on the whole sober YouTube community? I think it's great. I like it. That's my opinion. I hope to see it continue to grow. It comes in waves and peaks and troughs. Fuck, am I recording? Yes. It comes in peaks and troughs, sober YouTube. I remember way before I got sober, I was already watching occasionally sober content. And there were a few kind of luminaries, a few like Sacred Serpent and Delirium Dirk. That Noah guy, what the fuck is his channel? Noah Sober. Big No-No, and a few others. And occasionally, it feels like there's a kind of renaissance at the moment of sober YouTubers coming up. And that's a good thing. Being on YouTube and talking about sobriety, though, is a double-edged sword, because you have a lot of people holding you to account. And I imagine if I relapsed, which is always a risk, that will always be a risk for me for the rest of my life. No matter how long I've been sober, the relapse is just across the road in the 24-hour garage, just waiting for me at all times. And if that happens when you've become a person that people look to for their own sobriety, I think that might be dangerous. Or not dangerous, but risky. So, for example, that Noah guy that I mentioned, Big No-No, he was sober and documented his journey, and then he tried alcohol again and it didn't work out, and then he got sober and then he relapsed. He did all of that very publicly, and by the end of it, he'd said the same things so many times that I didn't find him sincere anymore. He damaged his own credibility, and that's dangerous. I don't want that, I don't. So that's why I'm kind of cagey with some information about how long I've been sober and stuff like that. I don't want you to know. But in general, the sober YouTube community is incredibly supportive and it's full of knowledge, and it is easy to, it's very responsive. Like the people in front of the camera, with a few exceptions, are also very accessible. You can go and ask them questions, and I like to think I'm part of that too. I do try to keep myself accessible, so it's good. Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate the support as always. Roger Masters asks, I've been told after a detox I might get a 3-month rehab. How scary is it to deal with your mind and the truth of who you used to be? It's very scary, Roger. Even now, I feel like the person who was drinking healthily, the version of me that was drinking healthily for a while, is not the same person that I am today. And that person had a very big social group, lots of friends. This sober version doesn't really. My friend circle is quite small now. And that's scary. The fact that you have to kind of close ranks and let people go and change and make real changes in your lifestyle, all of that is quite difficult. The fact that it makes you evaluate your own personality, who you are, that's scary too, because it turns out I'm not as funny as I thought I was. But underneath all of the alcohol and stuff, I'm actually quite a serious person. And for 25 years of drinking, or whatever it was, I thought I was kind of a funny and frivolous and interesting and reckless guy, and it turns out I'm not. I'm fucking serious and boring. And it's taken a long time to come to be okay with that. It is scary. It's a scary process of relearning who you are without the alcohol. But it's a good process, because the person that's underneath all of that is a much more honest, it's a much realer version of you. There's that phrase, in vino veritas, in wine truth. The truth comes out when you're drunk, being the implication. But I don't think that's true at all. It's called a mind-altering substance for a reason. It's because the stuff you're saying and you're doing is the product of a mind-altering substance. It's not the real you, and it's not the truth coming out. The real truth comes out in sobriety. The sober you is the real you. And once you've come to terms with that, and you're able to accept that version of you for whatever it looks like, then your life starts to improve. I had to let go of thinking that I was, a lot of stuff, and a lot of old friends that I have no interest in keeping contact with. So yeah, it is scary. I wish it was easier. I wish I could tell you that it was an easy process, but it isn't. It's worth it though. Thank you, Roger Masters. Stephanie asks, I'd love to hear you talk us through a typical drinking day and night plus hangover and withdrawal phase in different stages of the illness, and how the experience changed over the years. Stephanie continues, I know you touched on your lowest points several times already. There are plenty more. But do you have any specific memory that kept you up at night after sobering up? How did you cope with feelings of shame and embarrassment? Okay, so quite a few questions in here. Okay, so to address the first part, a typical drinking session followed by hangover or withdrawal at different stages of the disease. So in the very early stages, it would be a Friday, when I'm talking 14, 15 years old. We had a number of places we would go to. First of all, we would go and acquire alcohol some way. Usually a friend's brother or a stranger that you would give an extra couple of quid to buy you alcohol when they were buying their own. And we would get a bottle of cider like White Lightning or Frosty Jacks or something awful. And then we would all go off as a group. We always drank in groups, and always the same faces. And we would go to either a local park, or we would go to a series of garages. I don't know why we were attracted there, but it was away from all other houses. Or into the woods. Where I come from in the south of England, it's semi-rural and semi-urban. So we have access to countryside of forests, which is where we all, if there were girls involved, it was always forest and countryside, because then you can sneak off together and that kind of thing. But if it was just a group of lads together, then we would go off to this set of garages. Quite a depressing place looking back on it. It was quite bleak. But it was a big empty space. Houses were set away from it, so no supervision, and we would just drink. And I don't remember hangovers at that time. I think that I would wake up, I could drink, back then, like 3 litres of cider would be enough to make my memory start to fade. And I would wake up and play football the next day, like competitively. Or, go mountain biking or something. The hangovers didn't start until my 20s, I suppose. And then the hangovers were more like continued drunkenness. So in my 20s, I was never a lad's lad. Like, I didn't do the nightclubbing thing very often. It wasn't my style. I was already in long-term relationships in my early 20s. And with drinking buddies as well as girlfriends. Like, they would be both, girlfriend and drinking buddy. And we would drink together and get hammered. And then the next day in my 20s, because I was quite fit in my 20s, again, there was no real hangover. It was just like it was like drunkenness until the drunkenness had faded off. And then maybe some nausea and some dizziness and some fatigue. And you go and have a nap together in the afternoon. And it's actually it's like a bonding experience. Until, of course, that's what defines the relationship, and then the relationship falls apart. My problematic drinking began it was always problematic, but I mean, it started becoming a problem in my late 20s. And then I would be drinking to oblivion. I moved to Shanghai when I was 27, I think. And then I was almost never sober after I arrived. I didn't realise it until recently, but looking back, I was drunk the whole period. And then it was different. And then I would drink, and I'd be drunk for so long that I would then go out and seek other chemicals, other drugs, to prop up, to kind of stave off the hangover, I guess. And even then, towards the end of that, I was starting to get withdrawal rather than hangovers. I'm not sure where that happened, but it did. It was a state of being continuous, like, basically chronic alcoholism for me came before the binge alcoholism, which was the next part. What that looked like in practice was, like, my social life in Shanghai was very vibrant. Lots of events and big networks of people and things always happening. And I would be drinking before I arrived at any particular event, always, whatever it was, and would be drunk when I turned up, and that was kind of my normal state. And I'd turn up late and drunk, and then I would be the drunkest and still standing the longest, and then at 6 o'clock in the morning we would like go and get some terrible breakfast in like an expat pub, and then I would head home, sleep, continue, then go to work. But that got on top of me. It was like the drinking wasn't the problem for me, it was the withdrawal that made me eventually seek help. I didn't mind being drunk, but I recognised that my come downs were different after a while. And then finally, when I returned to the UK after the journey that I talk about in Just Crazy Enough to Work, binge drinking began and continued for several years. And that's the basis of this channel too, so I don't think I need to go into detail about that. Now, as for your follow-up questions, do I have any specific memory that keeps me up at night after getting sober? Yeah, the psychiatric ward that I was put on in Berlin is a constant source of motivation to stay sober for me, and that place was deeply traumatic. My experiences with delirium tremens, especially some of the things that are too violent, some of the hallucinations I had, which are so violent, I can't even say them on the YouTube channel. Keep those to myself. I keep those in mind. I never want to see them again. And my parents' faces of concern. The first time I was admitted to hospital, the look of fear on my parents' faces, which I still see vividly, that keeps me motivated too. Thank you for your questions, Stephanie. It's always good to see you in the comments. Next up, Jay Calm, long-time commenter. Like when I was talking about sharing audiences with LD and Slayer and a few other shades of clarity and so on, Jay Calm is one of the guys who's really got our back. So I've seen Jay defending me in the comments on my video, so thank you, buddy. I do appreciate it. It's not a question here, actually. Stu, big congrats on the 5,000 subs and your book's selling out. They are back in stock if anyone's interested. Backcountry.co. Check the description for the link. I feel so gross saying that stuff. Kudzi Senior, what are your views of the Sinclair method of alcohol recovery? You probably didn't go that route, but I'm sure as an influencer... Am I an influencer? Do I have influence? Either anecdotally or from the scientific crowd, to have an opinion on the Sinclair method. I'm going to level with you right now, Kudzi. I'm not sure what that is. I'm going to Google it before I start talking. Okay, so I just refreshed my memory on this. If you're not familiar either, the Sinclair method is an alcohol treatment by which you take an opioid antagonist before drinking. Like a Narcan or naltrexone, whatever it's called. Or antabuse, I suppose, would qualify for that. And Kudzi's question was, what do I think of that? Here is what I think. Fine. Go for it. At the end of the day, for me, the destination is what matters, and that is sobriety. And I don't really mind or make judgment about how you get there. As long as a person who needs to be sober, as long as you get there and you're committed to it, then you can use just about any technique you want, as long as it's not in some way harmful to anybody else. I don't pass judgment on how someone gets there. The Sinclair method, incidentally, from the quick just refresher that I did just then, is NHS approved, and so on and so forth, and that matters. Like, it's... whatever works, man, whatever works. Try everything, throw everything at the wall until something sticks, because it's your life on the line. So if it's the Sinclair method, or if it's, I don't know, eating an ostrich egg raw every morning, or if it's some grand symbolic gesture that you have to make for yourself, or if it's tattoos, or if it's meditation, it's not in competition with each other. And whatever it takes to remain sober, whatever works. That's all that matters. I personally would not be unwilling to try the Sinclair method should I feel like it was necessary for me. It isn't at the moment. Thank you, Kudzi. I've seen you in my comments talking about the Sinclair method before, so I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk about it. Oh, I should say Kudzi is looking for specific advice here. And Kudzi continues, I've tapered down considerably, but somehow I just don't seem to dry out completely. And I'm thinking with a protocol of some sort, my efforts can be enhanced. I think you're probably right. I think your intuition is right there, Kudzi. I think it might be of benefit to you. So, tell you what, you be our guinea pig this time. You go and try it, and let us know how you get on. Thank you, Kudzi. Sam Black. How do you deal with the shame about things you've done when drunk? Good question, Sam. I don't. I just live with it. I don't try to justify or reconcile the horrible and hurtful things that I did. I have to just face them, just acknowledge that I did them and that they are part of my personality, and make sure that I am working as hard as I can to never repeat them. And I don't think any level of mindfulness or meditation is going to make that pain go away. I think it's a necessary pain. The fear or like the discomfort of the horrible things you've done. Because I am a mindful person, and every now and then I'll be walking down the street at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and for no reason at all, some terrible, painful memory will be inserted into my brain, and I'll make this noise in public as I remember something horrible that I did or some terrible thing that I said. Like trying to control invasive thoughts. I'm sure there are people that will tell you that they have done it, they have achieved enlightenment or whatever, and they no longer have to deal with that stuff. But for me, I just have to acknowledge that, yeah, I did some pretty shitty things to some people that I love. And I made some people who only deserve to feel good feel pretty bad. And instead of reconciling that or trying to rationalize it, I just let it be. And part of the working the steps in AA is going to give you the tools you need to deal with that stuff. But I also think it's important that you don't just stamp that out and don't consider it done. Once you've done the steps or whatever, however you've processed it, it's not over. You still need to lock those away in a little part of your heart to remind you of the dark places alcohol will push you. Thank you for the excellent question, Sam. Hope that wasn't a bummer. Giles Parker, long-time friend of the channel. Giles asks, I have noticed lots of people in recovery discover a strong urge to help others and donate the time they have released from addiction. Why is that, do you think? What drives it? So, why do people become altruistic in sobriety? I was talking about this on a podcast the other day. I think that the process of getting sober, the process of recovering from addiction, is also a process of learning empathy. As you are learning to have sympathy for yourself, you inadvertently become more and more willing to let other people in. One of the major things that prevents people from getting help is asking for help. Okay, acknowledging and accepting help. Because that it gives away, you give away a piece of yourself when you ask for help. You admit something about yourself that you're not able to perhaps handle a particular situation on your own, even though you've convinced yourself all your life that you are capable. You have to finally admit that you're not, and you have to accept help. And that's daunting for people like me. The process of allowing people to help you is just rewarding to the point where it makes you want to do it for other people. They say that the measure of a society is in its willingness to protect the most vulnerable. That's what defines a healthy society, is its willingness to help those who are less fortunate in some way. And I've always held that to be true. I can't think of a better definition for a healthy society. And I feel like in helping other people, even on an individual basis, you are of benefit to society. And who doesn't want that? You have to be an absolute sociopath to not want that. And even if you are a sociopath, you'll discover in the process of sobriety that even that can be treated, you know. And you're right, the observation you make, Giles, that a lot of people in recovery want to donate the time that they've released from addiction because we feel like we have a lot more time on our hands. We want to give that back in a productive way. I wonder if there's... This is off the top of my head, but I wonder if there's some kind of dopamine replacement going on where without the addiction we're not creating the same kind of level of dopamine, so we seek it out in unusual ways, and one of those ways is helping people. It makes you feel good. Like, being altruistic is in a sense very selfish because of the positivity that you feel about yourself. Donating to charity is famously a good example where you hand over like £5 anonymously, and that enables you to feel like you've done something and give you that little dopamine hit. Working in recovery and sobriety is like that all the time. So I wonder if this is a form of addiction. That's stupid. Thank you for the question, Giles. I didn't answer it. The question was too good. Counting Sheep for Sleep. Good name. Counting Sheep for Sleep asks, I'm fascinated by your stories of what happened during your travels through the Silk Road. If there are still some to be told, I'd be very glad to hear them. I'm also curious if you were ever tempted by other drugs enough to binge them. Okay, yeah, I haven't talked about that on this channel, so I'll answer it very briefly now. Yes. I did experiment very heavily, and always have done, with substances other than alcohol. But not a single one ever got on top of me the way that alcohol did. And I wasn't using those drugs habitually just because I didn't form the same habits with them as I did with alcohol. And I've tried the lot. I've been through it. I have a lot of experience in that regard. But they just didn't get their hooks in me in the way that alcohol did. I don't know why. So Counting Sheep for Sleep says, as a polydrug addict, I never liked alcohol enough to start loving it, but I heard about people who quit drugs and then fell into alcoholism. I had the opposite experience. You were a polydrug addict who wasn't into alcohol. I was an alcoholic who wasn't really into drugs. Or did a lot, but couldn't force myself to like them in the same way that I had a relationship with alcohol. Do you worry that the opposite might happen to you? The implication of the question is, am I worried that I might take up drugs now that alcohol is missing from my life? Nope. When I say I'm sober, I know that I have this vape thing, and I drink ungodly amounts of coffee, and so I've still got nicotine and caffeine addictions, for sure. But when I say I'm sober, I really mean it. Like, I've got no desire to have smoke a joint or do anything with, or even like take CBD oil. None of it appeals to me. So to answer your question directly, I'm not very worried at the moment. But that confidence comes from the knowledge that if I so much as look at a line of coke or something, then the relapse is all the way. I just have to let it in one small way, and that's it. It's all over for me. My drug bone is connected to my booze bone and vice versa. So none of it for me. Apart from the caffeine and the nicotine and the exercise and the sobriety. I'm addicted to sobriety, I'm addicted to exercise and all of that stuff. Apart from all of my addictions, I am sober. All in Christoph asks, have you ever tried kratom for alcohol substitute? Another one I'm going to have to look up. I'm starting to feel very naive in the course of answering these questions. A plant from the coffee family. Its leaves, known as kratom, have been used in herbal medicine in Southeast Asia since forever. Kratom has an opioid-like property and some stimulant-like effects. Have I tried it? No. Would I try it? No. Godspeed. Everybody is free to do whatever they want and try whatever substitute for alcohol they like. I'll steer clear. But Godspeed. I'm glad it worked for you. Like I said in the opening, whatever works for you, I'm not judging. Okay, next up we have Nehemiah Karish. I hope I'm getting that close to right. Nehemiah asks, is there a history of alcohol abuse in your family? Yeah. I think you can look at any family and find evidence if you're looking hard enough. But yeah, quite a lot of my family are big drinkers, as we say in Irish families. Or he likes a drink. That usually denotes an alcoholic. And there's also different kinds of addiction. I want to be a bit cagey about this because I can never guarantee who's watching these videos, but a blood relative of mine had a gambling addiction that no one acknowledged until years later. And that's an interesting one. I'm particularly fascinated by gambling addiction and people who've recovered from it, because no one blows my mind. It's got a little bit of every other kind of addiction in it, you know? But Yes, blunt answer. Big Irish family. Yeah, there's alcoholism in my family. Not my father, not my dad or my mum. But yeah, it's in the family. And then a follow-up question from Nehemiah. Did you see generational trauma of alcohol abuse in post-Soviet countries that you've been to? That's a brilliant question. Yeah, I absolutely saw that. My very first impression of Belarus when I crossed the border by train. We were at a level, what we call in the UK a level crossing. It's where the gates come down, the train goes across a road, and the traffic waits. We crossed into the Belarusian border, and we went through one of those, and there was a guy, an old Belarusian man in a big fur coat and this big old bicycle, and as he was waiting for the train to go past, he was so drunk in that bike that he just fell to the floor. And I was like, welcome to Belarus. And I saw it a lot there. I saw opioid addiction more in Kyrgyzstan. Back in the day, in the 80s and 90s, heroin used to be shipped out of Afghanistan south, all the way down to like Cambodia, Thailand and Laos, the Golden Triangle, and then it would be distributed. Now though, since the Golden Triangle has largely kind of been regulated and like out of existence, all of the heroin out of Afghanistan travels north by road, specifically along the M41, which is a road called the Heroin Highway. It's the road that I cycled along. And the way that the opium farmers and distributors keep the local populations compliant is to give them opium as they travel. So places like Kyrgyzstan, a former Soviet state, have big problems with a growing heroin addiction. But alcohol specifically has caused problems with countries that have a direct border with Russia, in my experience. So Kazakhstan was particularly bad for alcohol. There were other drugs too. Someone tried to give me some ecstasy once in Almaty. So there are street drugs, but alcohol is the big problem in those places. Industrial places in former Soviet states where people were sent rather than moved to are like epicenters for alcohol addiction. Because the people who were moved to those locations, Aktau in Kazakhstan is a great example of this, a former nuclear city where people were kind of like former soldiers and former convicts were sent to go and do the dirty work of nuclear refinement and that kind of thing. A lot of those people are deeply damaged, and my first experience of walking into Aktau, I had to walk 20 miles across the desert to get there. It was pretty horrible. It was extreme poverty, and I remember like kind of toothless old Russian-speaking drunks just drifting, like always shirtless, just drifting around with no direction, and stray dogs with like one broken leg and kids playing naked around like some terrible dirty water. And that's generational alcoholism in an image, is a drunken father who hasn't been sober for a day in 20 years, walking half naked to go and get another bottle of vodka while his kids are playing unsupervised in the road, essentially. And that has impacts across the generations for years. We're lucky in the West that only in a few places we have it that bad. But in places like Kazakhstan, outside the main cities, it's really bad. Really, really bad. The whole place is defined by alcohol. No one is sober. It's really weird. And that leads on to another question that Nehemiah put to me about how children grow up around adults that drink alcohol. And how do we protect children from families that drink heavily? I wish it was as easy as just saying education is the answer. Because that is the answer, but in practice, no one cares. Education is such a hard thing to do. If you're unaware, the other part of my life is all in sexual health and sexual health and wellness, and sexual technology and stuff. And every brand that I work with that hires me wants to do an educational project to do something good about educating people on the pitfalls or the benefits of some arcane piece of sexual knowledge. And it never works because no one wants to be educated. When the whole culture is telling you that something like sex or alcohol is for the purpose of having fun, then no one wants to pay attention to the people who are like, well, unfortunately, that fun has consequences. And people will actively will shut that information out. So education is the answer, but it's not a useful answer. We protect children. I don't know, man. Sometimes the wisest thing a man can say is, I don't know, and I don't have an answer for that. I don't know how to keep children safe from adults who are drinking. Peter. Hello, Peter. It's good to see you here again. Friend of the channel, Peter, asks, talk about the big book. Maybe just focus on a chapter or two at first. I am going to talk in general terms about the big book. If you're unfamiliar, the Old Testament, or the New Testament of AA, is known as the Big Book. And it's written by a couple of people, really, and subject to editing since, but it's largely been the same since 1931 or whenever it was written. And it feels of its time. I have no issue at all with the steps themselves. For me personally, only steps 9 to 12 have universal appeal. The rest are very much couched in straight, white, heterosexual, male, Judeo-Christian terms. And that's fine as well. I'm past no judgment, but let me rephrase that. The big book is particularly useful for Judeo-Christian, straight, white men. And it is of use to everybody else too, but it's particularly of use to that group. It was written for straight, white American men, and it is absolutely of the most benefit to straight, white American men. I'm a European, and our relationship with the big book is slightly more critical. I seem to remember, it's been a while since I read it. I'm not so familiar that I feel qualified to talk on it right now, but look, I'll just say it outright. The big book's treatment of women is pretty bad. Enough to turn a lot of younger, especially European people, away from AA in general, even though I'm a firm believer that AA has a lot to offer regardless of your background. The big book, it could do with some revision, It could do with an update. And I know everybody has tried. Everybody, in the first 6 months of sobriety, in the first 6 months of going to AA, everybody is like, I'm going to rewrite this for a modern audience, and then nobody does. Or if they do, it doesn't catch on. And I'll be even more specific. Chapter 8, which is titled To Wives, is fucking gross. I don't know how anybody with a modern mind, like even if you are more conservative politically than I am, I don't know how anyone can read that today and be okay with it. I don't read it regularly because the language in it forces me away from it, given my kind of lefty and liberal values. I'll do some more specific answers to that one at another time, Pete. Thank you for the question. Okay, and then I think finally, it feels like we went through that quickly, but if you are, Jed3Jed asks, if you are able, could you speak about alcohol-related dementia, please? Oof. Okay. Alcohol-related dementia is a very, very scary outcome. One of the worst outcomes possible from alcoholism, and it's commonly called wet brain syndrome or Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome. And I did a little bit. It's scary to me personally. I have a personal connection with it because for a number of reasons. One is that I have a traumatic brain injury as a result of a cycling accident that I think partially led to the drinking problem. The second part, and I have since, I used to be a fighter as well, so I've had multiple concussions, and I'm very aware of the cognitive decline of old fighters, and I had some worrying MRIs done a couple of years ago that might suggest, I don't know. But the second one is that I studied neurolinguistics at university, and part of that was studying how language is created in the brain, and the Wernicke's area of your brain is a very important component of that. And when it goes wrong, it, like through a stroke or through dementia, it becomes very difficult to communicate. And the ability to communicate is profoundly important to everybody, but I feel it as well. Like my ability to communicate is really important to me. And the thought of having that taken away, especially by something which is self-inflicted, in inverted commas, by alcohol, it keeps me up at night. And it keeps me up worrying, what if the damage is already done? What if it is now inevitable? Because I'm not an expert on this stuff, but I know anecdotally that the toxic effect of alcohol is enough to be damaging your brain. When you combine that with the vitamin B1, the thiamine deficiency, which I've had, that makes you just, for some bizarre reason, makes you go absolutely loopy. It feels within reach for me. Like, it's a condition that I think about a lot. My first ever diagnosis, as I mentioned recently somewhere, my first diagnosis when I started the process of getting sober was pseudo-dementia. So I've already kind of gone through the process of, I have some first-hand experience of what it's like to not be oriented for space and time, and to recall things incorrectly. One of the symptoms of Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome, wet brain syndrome, is that you invent memory. And that's also a process of delirium tremens, where the things in your head and the things that you're perceiving just don't align in some way, but you can't identify why. So when people say that delirium tremens is, when a doctor describes it as confusion, that's part of that confusion, is that what you know to be true and what to be perceptually true don't match up. And to live like that must be very scary. If you get it early, if you get it diagnosed early, there is a chance that you can recover through cognitive behavioral therapy and so on. And through thiamine treatment, you can recover some of the cognitive deficits to an extent. But it is irreversible. And I know that I have irreversible damage from what I've been through. The MRIs and just going through delirium tremens. Someone did the maths for me the other day in my comments, and they pointed out that the amount of times that I've had delirium tremens, which is 5, I have statistically a 50-50 chance, like whether I'm alive or dead right now is 50-50, given the background. My life is the toss of a coin, and that's very sobering. But it's the same with Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome. It's the same with alcohol-related dementia. If you have it, you have to deal with the additional stigma that yours is not brought on by the natural processes of old age. It is, in the eyes of society, self-inflicted. And you don't benefit from the same sympathy and empathy as someone, in their 90s who's just acquired it slowly. Symptoms of it are terrible as well. They start slowly with memory loss or memory fabrication, which is an even scarier thought, that you're just inventing memories that are not associated with actual events. And then personality changes and lack of coordination, lack of impairment of your judgment. I think it's got to be close to most rational people's worst fears. And how much you have to drink and for how long in order to provoke this condition is not known. Or prevention is the only cure. Let's put it that way. Abstinence is the only way to be sure that you won't get alcohol-related dementia. That was a gloomy ending. Thank you for the question. It was a thinker. I'm grateful for the opportunity to just talk about it for a moment. I haven't seen it firsthand. I understand it's quite rare, but I also imagine it's powerfully unsettling, and it makes me, if you can't tell from my body languages, I'm uncomfortable talking about it because I just have an intuition that it could easily be part of my own future. Okay, let's sign off there for the day. I know I've said this repeatedly, so I'll just cover it off quickly. The people watching this video are likely to be familiar with who I am and with my channel already. And you are the most important part of my audience. The people who come back and the people who interact and leave questions. And it wakes me up every day with the motivation to be sober, to know that all of you are on the journey with me, with all of your peaks and troughs. We're all kind of walking the line together. And that's reassuring. There is safety in numbers. And I think that is the ultimate benefit of organizations like AA and of building communities like my audience, or more specifically LD's actual community. There's safety in numbers. You know, if you consider alcoholism like a predator, as I do, then it's going to pick off fewer of us if we group together. I'd like to thank you for watching. I'd like to thank you for watching repeatedly. If you are new to the channel, give it a like and a subscribe. And more importantly, help me pay the rent. If you're interested in my travels and my backstory, I'm not going to ram it down your throat. You're under absolutely no obligation to go and buy it, but the book is available on my site. The link is in description, or you can Google it. Just Crazy Enough to Work by Stu Nugent. That's me. Thank you so much for being at my side. And as always, good luck out there.